Okay, it's 5 o'clock. Let's call to order the work session of the Board of Trustees. I have two things that I generally would like to talk about tonight in terms of board communication. The first would be the Robert's Rules of Order and the things I've learned about them and how we're going about them and how I'd like to go about them going forward. And the second is regarding the minutes. So you might notice that, sorry, that was loud, that everyone has a cheat sheet at their spot, which I would like to stay here if possible, please. That will help us to run the meeting more clearly. You'll notice the third column, can I interrupt a speaker with this motion? And there are several where you can, which people have used at various points, like the point of order, overrule the chair, request information. I think personal privilege is one of those. So I think having this and having everybody literally singing from the same hymnal is going to be helpful. One of the things that has been most confusing as the secretary and as the president, in my experience, has been embedded motions. So, for example, if Rachel moves to approve the minutes and David seconds it, and then Daisha has an amendment to the minutes, we have tried to do it like an outline where it kind of steps into the next one, and then we have to go back, and then we have to go back, and I get lost in the sauce about where we're at in terms of what's got a second, what have we voted on? Well, it turns out that the norm that I've been following, which is the way it's always been done in meetings I've been in, has been incorrect. What you're supposed to do is if Rachel has moved to approve the minutes and David seconds, and then someone comes in with an amendment, I go back to Rachel and I say, Rachel, would you like to withdraw your motion? And it's up to her then to either withdraw or not. And if the answer is no, thank you, then we proceed with the comments about the minutes and the vote. And presumably the person who would like to amend them might say something at that time about what they want to do, but it's not a secondary motion. I think that is going to make both my life as the chair and George's life as the secretary and Roberta's life much, much easier, because we're not going to do the embedded motions anymore. Does anybody have any questions about that? Or, okay. The other thing that I think is going to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm trying to read as fast as I can because I hadn't been prepared for this question. So help me, I had understood it differently from what I was studying, was that the amendment takes precedent over the original one. That once an amendment is made, it has to be seconded.
To amend a motion? Mm-hmm. Yes, but to amend a document, I don't think so. So for example, if I have moved to a, well, let me think of a better example. If I have moved that we should limit the discussion on a certain item to 5 minutes, and you would like to amend the motion so that we limit discussion to 15 minutes, that you can do. But to amend a document, once the motion is on the floor to amend or to approve a document, that stands. There's no amending the document.
Document is what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Helpful. Thank you. I thought you were talking about the motion. So
great. I think that is going to be very helpful going forward. The last thing I want to talk about is as we've already said in meetings, the Robert's Rules are a tool. They're not a law. And so different boards, different organizations are going to follow them loosely or more tightly, and that's all within the rules. so I'm not criticizing any of my predecessors, but the way this meeting has been run ever since before I was on the board was, I need a motion to approve the minutes. I need a motion to adjourn. I need a motion to put the chairs on the ceiling, whatever. And that's also not how that's supposed to be done. I'm supposed to say, okay, we're talking about the football field replacement lighting, and Michelle's supposed to give her presentation, and then I'm going to be saying something along the lines of, okay, I need a motion, and you all are going to have to tell me what you want to do with that. I think the assumption is that we want to approve it, because otherwise there's no reason for it to be on the agenda. But for me to feed you all the motions is inappropriate, and that's also causing the confusion with the embedded motions, the motion within a motion within a motion. So I'm going to work real hard to not do that anymore, and I'd appreciate it if everybody would work hard to give me the full sentence with a verb when there's a motion, okay? And by doing that, I think we're going to go a long way toward uncomplicating the minutes, because part of what's made the minutes so difficult is having things go out of the order of the agenda. Now we're making a motion over here to do this, and now we're amending that, and now we're, all over the place. And it makes it really difficult to write them in an outline form like they're supposed to be. And so what I'd like to do is propose the following. Let me pull up the right screen. And I did talk with a couple of you about this, and I sent it to the board officers, and in a minute, I'll find it. Sorry. It was a text. So I would like to propose that we return to the way the minutes were before we started adding detail. And I would like to propose a 1 to 2 sentence summary. Oh,
Sorry. If we're switching to minutes, I'd love to keep talking about Robert's rules a little bit,
okay.
if that's okay, just because I
Sure.
think they are two different.
Yeah, that's fine.
But
Nobody said anything, so I thought it was, okay, go ahead.
I didn't know what, anyways, I didn't know where we were at, so.
Go ahead.
Is that okay?
It's a conversation.
My question is, sorry. I totally agree with you that the Roberts rules are to help us. It's a tool. It's not like following it, but I do think that if we consistently follow it, the point is to make these meetings more effective and efficient. So I want to understand this order of business, because my understanding of it is typically the chair will introduce the agenda item. There's a motion, a second, and then the discussion. And so that's where I feel like we've had some past, like, sometimes it's one way, sometimes it's other. So are we saying you'll introduce an agenda item, you'll have all the discussion questions, and then you'll ask for a motion? Is that the order you're saying, or what is the order that we're following for that?
That's a good question. Rachel, it sounds like you've got an opinion.
Right. This has been an ongoing.
Microphone. Sorry.
This has been an ongoing question because oftentimes we're receiving a presentation.
Yeah.
So it'll be, I'm going to introduce this with this explanation of what it is. And in my understanding, that should be a brief. I am here to talk about the weather today. It is currently X degrees outside. I'd like to move that we blank about the weather, right? Then I'm allowed to give that information, or you're allowed to give that summary information. And coincidentally, moving over to the minutes, that is exactly the same information that I believe belongs as the substance of the matter in the minutes, is whatever that introduction was, and then an outcome of that. So they are tied together for me, but I agree it's been tough because people have a lot of opinions, which is awesome, but the order in which they get to do them is also difficult. So But that's my understanding, is it's acceptable for a brief description of it. And then you would move to, you'd have a motion, you'd have a second, and then you'd open the floor for whatever pattern of feedback you decided was appropriate for that matter. So if it was one that you were like, look, I feel like this one is maybe going to get out of hand, this is the pattern I'm going to follow to make sure everybody gets a turn, then that would be your decision as chair, is how I understand it to be.
Thank you. Does that make sense?
Well, so if I understand, is you're introducing the agenda item like, today's agenda was strategic. Actually, that's not a good one because you don't have to do it on.
Yeah, the info thing.
So
I'll
the
just introduce
discussion
first.
only, we don't have to give motions or anything, but let's go to the football field lighting. So my understanding is you introduce the agenda item, and if you have a sentence to share or whatever about it, but then we do a motion and a second, and then we do discussion. Is that what I understood?
I would like to do that a little bit differently.
Okay.
I would like to be able to say, the next item on the agenda is the football field replacement lighting. Hand it over to Michelle, let her do her presentation.
Okay.
And then come back and I'd say, okay, the floor is open. We can discuss first, or we can do the motion first. David, do you have a?
My recommendation,
Sorry.
okay, is so that we can avoid having amendments to the motions as much as possible. Some of the specific wording for motions, for the whatever motion we want to approve would come through some of the discussion. So for things that are on the agenda, since we've already approved having this agenda, I would suggest that with the football field replacement lighting, that gets introduced. We get the information on it. We ask questions, and then we can have a little bit of discussion. And then after that, then somebody makes the motion, we second, and then there is still a chance for people to have additional discussion or potentially to amend that. But that way, we don't make an initial amendment to, let's say, approve the football field replacement lighting plan. Then we get into the discussion and realize that what we really want to do is something very different than that. And
Right.
so let's have the discussion first, then motion second. Any additional motions or recommendations for amending the motion, and then move forward with voting rather than
Anticipating the
Yeah.
motion. Yeah, I agree
Yeah.
with you. I think that would be the clearest way. And so what I would say under that circumstance would be, Michelle would finish up her presentation. I'd say, okay, the floor is open. And that would be the point at which if someone wants to go ahead and, if it's a really simple thing that we've all already agreed on, we can say, I move to approve the football field replacement lighting as presented. Or, if we need more information, I move that we ask Michelle to go out and get this information and report back. And then we can vote on that. And that way, two things, like you said, we're not doing the embedded motions, and it'll be very clear for Roberta when she writes up the meeting, the order that things need to happen, and they'll follow the order of the minutes. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. But then also, we all need to be more specific with what is the specific motion that we're making. Like, for the football field, we're getting ahead of ourselves. But I motion to approve hiring Lyle and Friends Company to do the football field lighting replacement. That way we're very specific, and then that is the substance, the general substance of what was discussed. According to
Yes.
Robert's Rules of Order, the general substance comes through the specific wording of the motion, and only the wording of the motion that's the final amended motion. So if we don't put all of the votes of all the amendments in there, we only put what the final wording of the motion as amended was, and then the vote. That
So
way,
if someone came in and motioned to amend to Lawrence and Sons lighting, and then a third person came in and wanted it to be Witt and Pals, then, we'd go all the way through that discussion, and at the very end, we would arrive at the lighting company, and that would go into the minutes.
yeah, it would
And
be only
wouldn't
be
have to
what
go through all
was
the
approved.
rigmarole.
Because that's the motion that was ultimately voted on.
Correct.
And-
That's
yeah.
what I think too, is what needs to happen. I think that'll be easier for Roberta, and ultimately, I think it'll be easier for patrons who want to come in and find out what the heck we did last Monday to look, and they'll have a very comprehensive and simple list with a couple of sentences saying, you know, the motion was this, maybe a little summary of Michelle's presentation about the football thing, and, you know, then the motion was this, the vote was that, end of the story. Go ahead, Rachel.
I was just going to say, when you talk about a summary of what, in that example, Michelle has presented, to me, that is redundant to the documents that are in the board packet to the community, and I wouldn't want to draw people away from both. Both of those documents are needed for them to fully understand, in addition to watching the live stream if they're very invested in the details. So I wouldn't want to repeat information in the packet that's been provided in our minutes. I would be cautious about that.
I have an idea, and people are going to think that we talked, but we didn't because you're too busy. What if we put a link to the document in the minutes? Like have it be item number 9, link to the board packet document that has all of the information for item number 9, and then the motion by, seconded by, vote was this. And then with the text of the motion as David described. Is that something that would be possible?
I think that would feel good, and I think that it would get us back to a place where minutes are neutral, and that's the part where we've been struggling. Minutes need to be neutral, and that's always been the problem with the transcript. I mean, we've talked about that for 2 years now, is that there's a lot of ums and maybes and inflection that you cannot pick up in a word-by-word transcript. So that's a good idea.
Roberta, do the HTML links to the board documents ever change once they've landed where they're going to be? Brandon, do you know if they do?
No,
It wouldn't, so we wouldn't have to worry about like moving a folder and having to go back and amend everything. We could keep it the same. Okay, so find them a permanent home somewhere where they can live, and then the minutes will continue to be accurate. Yes, Yue.
Yeah, right now it's not stifling. So
Oh, it's not a linkable link?
basically, you go to that page and the address is a general address. So you,
It's like wl.k12
yeah, you put
and
that,
nothing
you
after.
cannot, let's say, I tried the English figure out something. And I don't have the link for that.
So you have to say click here, then click there, then click there.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not a link that you can click and go to the ballot.
Okay, that is important. Thank you.
But I think it's a good idea to
Do you?
make it very
there are.
objective and neutral.
each one of these has a specific.
Has a
It
URL.
opens it up as a file. So if you look at the.
They each have a specific URL, but when you click on it, depending on what your computer's set to, it may open it in the browser, or it may just download it.
Oh, okay. So
But
there's
each
a,
document does have a specific link.
Each one has a
Yes.
specific-
From what I see, when I'm looking at it
Or
right now.
maybe I try to link the whole
Yeah, there's no link to the whole packet. Each
packet.
document
Yeah,
has an
yeah.
individual.
okay.
Okay, if that's the case, yeah, just when I tried.
Got it. That makes sense. That makes sense. Thank you. Yeah.
I think when we're talking in regard to the minutes, there's two things that we're considering. The first one is what's required by Indiana code. And then the second one is what's helpful to the community. So the first part, when I'm thinking about it, if we go to, if I understood correctly, and maybe I misunderstood, of just using the motion and having that be the general substance, the public access counselor actually says you have to share about the discussion. And if you remember, we used to do that. We would only share what was the the motion, and then we would say discussion ensued, and we actually didn't share any details. And so I had asked the public access counselor if that was allowed, and they had said, and I had shared this before, and I'm happy to share it again, but they had said, this office is not convinced the phrase discussion ensued captures the general substance of anything. Undoubtedly, the law gives a governing body some latitude when it comes to content of meeting minutes. Even so, it must be more than noting a discussion ensued. And so our minutes have to have more than just the motion. It has to have some details to what we were discussing in that.
Okay, Rachel, then David. Oh, David, then Rachel.
I was just going to say that I believe, that feels contrary to what we heard from our attorney today about what general substance means. But B, I think linking to the preparatory document explains, once we as a board of 7 have a majority vote for or against something, then our policy dictates and good boardsmanship dictates that we are all behind the outcome of that vote. So understanding who said what or who fell on what side of it is not really relevant for anything other than a political campaign, and that's not what we're doing here.
Okay, David?
I think we have to think about what the purpose of all of this is to make sure that the community has access to information.
Yep.
And I think that we already have the link to the recording of our meetings. So that and the lawyer today had said that the YouTube transcript technically does meet the definition, although I will say that it is excessive compliance or aggressively excessive compliance. And
Malicious compliance?
No,
not malicious. Oh, good.
I think it's way too much and a bit ridiculous.
It is too long. That
but-
was the suggestion of the person who was going to come
But
talk.
I think the purpose, I also think it's important to think about the context of when that decision was made, of nothing else was shared at that time other than the minutes, all of the other documents, right? Were not publicly available until much
They
later.
actually were at this time.
They were.
Yeah.
But the phrase "discussion ensued," that ultimately leads to like what the motion was. The motion itself, that contains the substance of what was discussed and agreed upon, and then all of the other information is provided on there. And our purpose is to be transparent to the community of everything that was done, and having the YouTube video and all of the documents linked, I think, does provide more information for anybody that wants to, and avoids us getting into any interpretive discussion over what was talked about.
Yep, George?
You know, on that note, since we have all this technology available to us, how about we let the community make the determination about what the discussion was, and we could put discussion ensued and then a timestamp from the YouTube video about where that discussion was.
I think that's a great idea. And then put the link at the top so that the link is obvious. And most people are probably not printing this out and reading it on paper, I would think. So if we have hyperlinks, they'll get there.
And so that way, not any one of us 7 gets to decide what they think was said.
And most of all, that will allow us to spend the time that we've been spending on minutes on more important things. I think that's the goal ultimately. Yes, Stacia?
I think our city council is actually a good example of minutes that the community has found helpful. And I think the way that they have done it demonstrates to me what public access counselor says we need to do is they share the motion, the recommendation, and then they share a brief summary of what was discussed among the board members. The interesting thing to note is it's actually no board member on the city council that's writing those minutes. It's, shoot, now I forgot her title, but whatever her title is, it would be like Roberta. Roberta is writing a neutral summary of what was shared. Then that document, that draft is being shared with the secretary and the board. And if anyone feels like this misrepresents this, then you share, I would like to revise this, and we revise it and move forward. Where the past behavior, and if I understand what's some of you are wanting right now, is once again saying to the community, if you want to go watch the entire thing, read everything, then you can know what's going on. But we're unwilling to put in the minutes a brief summary, which is what the Public Access Counselor plus Indiana Code has said has to be in the minutes.
Rachel?
I think that it's important to note that the city council does not have the same history of conflict, nor do they spend nearly the amount of time that we do talking about minutes. And so given our history of conflict and given that we have a member who provides their personal commentary on our business on a regular basis, I don't feel that we are a correct comparison to say how the city, that we should do what the city's doing. They just are not dealing with the same difficulties that we have. So I just don't see that to be apples and apples at all.
Thank you. George?
Also, I'd like to point out that we kind of have that set up already, and it's a setup that people haven't agreed on. Roberta, who faithfully sits back there every week, already does what was just described. And for some people, that still hasn't been enough. And so that's why I think timestamps and links to documents will give everyone what they need. They don't have to watch the whole video if there are timestamps, because they can click on the timestamp and go directly to the part of the discussion they want to watch. So no one is going to have to be forced to sit through 3 hours of this. They can choose the 10 minutes they'd like to look at and then let that be done.
And I think most of our patrons in this community are plenty informed enough to be able to interpret those documents correctly. And if they're not, I would invite them to come talk to us or ask a question. So, Daisha?
I was just going to share from past experiences, we actually haven't followed the procedures that should be followed for revising minutes. For example, last month, Lawrence had recommended revisions. That document was never written and shared in the packet. And so I do think that that would simplify all this discussion, is if whatever revisions are being recommended, if there's disagreement, if it's a quick, good point, I missed that, I'll fix it, then the draft is updated. If it's something that a member says, I disagree, I don't want that, then the proper procedure is you now have that revised version that matches what was requested. And that's where a lot of our debate has been, is an unwillingness to even follow that step. So my thought is if we would do that, that I think that would help us have a more successful and limited conversation in the meeting, because you just have the two documents, you decide which one you're going to vote for, and then you move on.
George?
I hear you, but doing it the way that we've been describing makes it so that no one has to do that, because everything that was said in the open on camera is right there available for anybody to look at. And with the timestamps, they don't have to watch the whole thing.
And I think also that leads nicely into my last suggestion, which is, why is this loud? Which is that Roberta would write the minutes, the initial draft based on what we've decided here with the timestamps and the URLs and so on, and the text of the motion. Then she would hand the editable file to George. And if, for example, someone finds that the timestamp has the wrong number in it and it should be 50 instead of 15 or whatever, they would send that information to George. He would verify it and edit it. And that document would then be brought to the whole board no later than Friday before the meeting, so that we all have the weekend to make sure that we're all satisfied. But I think it would be less edits, for one thing, if we do it this way. And the other, it would take the repeated draft issue away, which is also one of the areas where we've argued. So, we're putting short declarative sentences and the text of motions in. We're letting George be the arbiter of truth, justice, and what actually happened based on based on the video.
I am not the arbiter of anything.
And then we're bringing a final draft of the minutes to the whole board by, say, Friday, so that we can vote on it Monday and everybody can be satisfied. I think that process would be, it would get the minutes out more quickly, because once Roberta has the template, it's going to be very fast for her to update the URLs and the timestamps and crank it out in a couple of days. So we would have a lot of time to then review it, and then we could have it by the Friday before the meeting, make sure everybody's chill, and then we vote on it and move on with life and do other things that are better for kids. Anybody disagree? You would go ahead.
Mentioned that the transcripts option. I wonder, we have a transcript option or no? Go ahead.
It is legal and it is overkill. But there's no reason not to use a transcript. We could certainly include the link to the transcript if someone preferred to read rather than watch a video, or if someone had vision issues or auditory issues that would prevent the video from being a good source material for them. We could include the transcript.
I think that having the combination of the transcripts and the timestamp is a good idea. So that way people have a choice, and you can prefer to read it very quickly, because you can easily skip.
And you can search.
Yeah, search. Yes, search for term. The only difficulty I think is probably I don't know how the YouTube will capture the voice and have to identify some basic things. Kind of break it down, right? Otherwise, it's a whole.
It's just a whole wall of text. I'm not sure how that looks.
So you
Is
need
it?
to be break down into topics, and I think the benefit of it is nobody needs to interpret it or select which to report, and it's completely objective and neutral, and so we don't need to discuss about minutes anymore.
Okay, Rachel? And David?
I do believe that the full transcript is excessive, but in listening to you speak, I do think particularly, I mean, the difference between a video and a text transcript is someone who does not have English as a first language can easily dump the text into a translator, where a video does not allow them to do that. So given our community, it would be a helpful tool for some, I would imagine. I don't know how translates, but
Probably not well.
Probably just as right? But
There are equivalents in every language.
oh, yeah. But yeah, I do think, I mean, for some patrons, that would probably be helpful information.
Okay, David?
I would be very hesitant about us having any type of formal approval of a YouTube transcription.
Okay.
It does not work well for all voices. It can't differentiate who is talking, and it's 35 pages of information that I don't know that any of us want to go through and check for accuracy. If we were to actually approve that as something formal that we're putting out, then we would have to make sure that every single word that is transcribed is accurate, and that's going to turn minutes into hours. So
Hours.
I think it can be fine as some supplemental document that we say, we make very clear these are supplemental automated transcriptions that we've put out to make things more accessible, but they're not official minutes.
Okay, I'm down with that. Is that what you were going to say, Yue? Or?
Who tax, actually right now, we're in the chat, it's written, ask chat to summarize it for you. And for the committee members who wants to have a very quick summary of what's going on.
For someone who maybe doesn't speak English as a first language, it can then translate it out. And, yeah,
I mean, we don't, when we pass the minutes, we can just pass the
Here's the topic, here's the documents, here's the motion, boom. To the transcript?
But I think with Mark. Yeah. Times are also-
I think, doesn't the transcript include periodic timestamps through it? Yeah, I thought it did. Yeah, I thought it did too. So maybe,
They differentiate.
no. Yeah, I don't know if we want to manually start editing the transcript. I think maybe just, if the timestamps are in there, and if we're putting the timestamps in the minutes, then someone could merge those two pieces of information and find what they're looking for in the transcript without us fiddling with it. Because like David said, we don't want to get into a liability issue of having approved and ratified some document that may have errors, or where I'm saying too many times and so on. What were you going to say, George? Sorry if you weren't.
I was going to say, I'm fairly sure we already indicate that the YouTube transcriptions are not completely accurate. And I'm looking for it now, but there's normally, yeah, here it is. Even on the live video, there is an option in YouTube to auto-translate.
Oh,
It can translate into Akan, Albanian, Amharic, Assyrian, Basque, Catalan, Corsican, just about anything you want.
that's incredible. We live in the future. It's unreal. Rachel?
I had another question.
Horrible right now.
I had another question. We're talking about minutes. I know we're talking about kind of scaling it back and linking to documents that would actually be helpful to our community. I have always been a little bit unclear on what level of the vote we need to report. And I know in my time on the board that changed, where we started adding a specific names of people and what their vote was on any given item. And I can't recall if that was a requirement or if that was a preference of the board. But I don't recall.
Do you know?
Does anybody know the
Having
answer?
like George voted yes, David voted no, if that's required or if that's just a,
I'd have to look it up because we are all, let me rewind and phrase this a different way. So a lot of times when people talk about Robert's Rules of Order, they think about Congress, but there's a couple of distinctions between us and Congress. One, each person is a individual, not quite sovereign, but elected representative of the people that sent them. We are not. We are a corporate board and we only speak with one voice, and each one of us individually doesn't have any power to actually do anything. Two, Congress uses a modified version of Robert's Rules of Order that is specific to them. So the way they do things isn't necessarily an example of how we should do things, because we are legally distinct in a lot of ways.
Daisha?
So if I remember correctly, we switched over per a request from a school board member just wanting the community to be informed. But it does say in Indiana code that if, it says a record of all votes taken by individual members if there is a roll call. So that's where the code directs us in.
So for
when we have
votes
to-
for officers and so on, we could do
Well, and that's what I wasn't clear. I actually was thinking about this the other day, is I didn't know, because now that we list it all, is this considered a roll call vote versus, and I don't know. But that's just what Indiana code says, is when you're required to do that.
Thank you. David?
The vast majority of our votes are 7 to nothing. And I think it's fine for us just to list everybody's name on the votes. I think it fits with the spirit of the content, or the wording, the discussion, the general substance of the discussion. Putting who voted, however, I think that's fine. I think we've spent a lot of time on minutes. This is a relatively minor thing. I think putting the names is fine, and
Okay.
there's no need for really more discussion, I don't think.
Okay, so yes to names. I'm fine with that. Anybody object or?
Just to offer some context, David's right. What we do with the video board is effectively a roll call vote, because there's only two kinds of votes, roll call vote and voice vote, and we don't do voice votes normally.
Okay.
So
So we'll just continue to include the names and go from there. Lawrence, you've been kind of quiet. I'm going to get you with your mouth full. Do you have anything to add?
Regarding the meeting minutes, I think,
Oh, microphone. Sorry.
yeah, regarding the meeting minutes, I think what we have the last month's meeting minutes is pretty good. So we just need to change that a little bit here, a little bit there, and that will be a pretty good one. That's my preference, because we have worked for a long time to reach that point. We have pretty much fit what our Indiana open door law required, and also is very kind of summary of what we talk, what we discuss, and what we decide.
So by adding the link to the transcript, you're good with the minutes that way?
Yeah, you can do that, but what I'm saying is what we already have is pretty good one. We don't need some, I mean, in my opinion, we don't need big changes as long as we did what we are doing right now. What we have doing right at this point in time, I think the last month's meeting minutes as an example.
Like
I think-
January's?
Yeah, I think that's pretty good enough. And basically, I mean, but again, if you guys think the transcript, whatever other options, I think I'm okay with that. But we still have the issues. Let's say, no matter what format you have, if somebody want to change the meeting minutes, what's the procedure for that?
The procedure I propose would be that Roberta shares an editable document with the secretary, George, or whoever is in that seat right then. And if I, for example, have a suggestion, I send that to George, and he checks it for accuracy. And then if it's accurate, he puts it in, and he and I can communicate about the substance of it if necessary. And then by the Friday before this meeting, then there's a final version online that everybody can agree to.
Yeah, the only concern, the possible issue with that is, I think that's good approach, but the only thing is if I don't agree, no matter what George decides, is that accepted or feels that, and maybe somebody disagree. And then in that case, probably we have to talk that on the meeting, which is, we
Well-
prefer not to talk on the meeting.
Right, and that's why we're taking the personalization and the discussion part out, and we're linking to the source documents, and we're linking to the timestamp in the video. So if someone wants to know what the discussion was, they can get there. But we're going to not write out, like, Lawrence said this and Amy disagreed and said that. We're going to take that part out. So hopefully there won't be anything to disagree about, because it'll only be facts. There won't be any opinion or characterization in there, okay?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is, in case somebody we disagree, and then we can still bring that to the meeting to discuss. And basically, I don't think we need to do that. But in case that happened, that's back to the rubber rule. I think we need kind of subsidiary motions. For example, the last month's meetings, I say probably we need the meeting minutes of everything is perfect. And then there's only one thing that I need to change, basically the roll call name and who you vote. I think that's reflect the fact. And I have that something, let's say we have subsidiary motions, and then I will submit that motion, then somebody second, if no second, then no need to talk. And then we have discussions and we vote for that. So if we accept that, and then we update the initial motion. And if it's turned on, that's fine. We just back to the initial motion, the main motion to vote for that. I think if the rubber rule have that kind of procedures, that's probably the best way. At least it's pretty best practice for us to do our business
What about
in
this?
professional ways. You see what I mean? I mean, so basically, it's not the, I mean, sometimes we still need to find a way to reach the consensus quickly and easily and then
And before the
professionally,
meeting.
professionally before the meeting. So, but in case we have, that's why I think if we follow the rubber rule, we can do our business in a professional ways. So that's,
I have a question.
yeah.
If George and whoever has a change
Yeah.
can't come to an agreement between themselves,
Okay.
what if it comes to the three of us as board officers to decide? And then whatever reaches the meeting is the final version. Would that be?
I think, I mean, the meeting minutes still the whole board's. The first day I joined the school board training, this day I was told the meeting minutes, the only official document, and we communicate with outside of the school board through the meeting minutes, and that's kind of permanent record. So I think that's our school board. Everybody should be to work on that and make sure that's. And also, I think I mean a reliable, accurate meeting minute is pretty much the minimum requirement for any government agent. So that's my feelings. So.
Okay. Rachel?
I think we've heard loud and clear from our community that they do not desire to see us debate details of minutes in a meeting and spend valuable time. So it's not a matter of obscuring them or a lack of transparency. I think the plan that's outlined for links and timestamps gives full transparency while avoiding public conversations that do nothing but aggravate our constituency.
Thanks. George?
Lawrence, was there something in the discussion that gave you the impression that we were not going to let board members make objections about things?
No, I don't think so. I just, in case, because we still need to handle the situation. I mean, if somebody disagree what's on the meeting minutes, and then I think from my point of view, the best and easiest way is just go through the meetings, rubber rules. You have some motions, and then we motion, second, discussion, vote, and then we done. We move
What I'm
on.
trying to get from you is I'm trying to figure out why you think that we wouldn't do that,
Wouldn't do what?
what you're describing.
I think he's saying because I said that subsidiary
Oh, yeah,
motions
that's
weren't
that's
allowed.
my, yeah. I think,
that we
my
would-
understanding, if I'm correct, if I'm wrong, please correct me. My understanding is you prefer not have any subsidiary motions. We just go ahead and vote for the main motions. That's my understanding.
I would
your
prefer,
preference.
I would prefer that we get all the documents to a point where we can all agree on them before the meeting. That's where I'm at. So hopefully we won't need those because we're already there.
Yeah, that's exactly why we say, I said why we need subsidiary motions, because that's the
Right.
best way we reach the consensus, or maybe we cannot reach consensus, but no matter what, we can move on, you know?
Right.
So for example, I mean, this meeting minutes, one thing. For example, if we have some policies, and I mean, member A want to change a little bit here, member B want to change a little bit there. So we have several amendments. You have 100 amendments, that's fine. So we can go through that one by one, you know, that systematically, and then by the end of all the amendment, we vote, discussion, then we back to the main motion, go ahead, vote for that, and then we move on. So you see, that's kind of systematically and organized way to handle we will have different opinions. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I'm hopeful that by changing the format of the document that we won't need to have any of that anymore. Does that make sense? Because we won't be saying Lawrence said this and Amy disagreed, or using words that have motive or value or anything other than factual information in the minutes. We just want straight up facts. And if you disagree with the way, for example, that a vote is reported, we're going to be doing all of them by roll call, all of them with the names, right? So if you disagree with that going forward, you and George could work that out over email or by the phone or however in between the meetings so that we don't have to have that conversation here. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. I totally
Okay.
agree. So no matter what I'm saying is, no matter what format we will end up with, we want to have some ways to reach the consensus
Yes.
quickly and easily.
Yeah.
I mean, but in case we cannot finish that before the meeting, in case there's some talks in the meeting, I think that's the best way we can handle that different the opinions in a professional ways. You know,
Yeah.
you see what I mean?
Yeah, I
That's what
agree.
I mean, you can say, I have no problem with the transcript or whatever you guys think,
Mm-hmm.
as long as I'm not that strong mind in case the format, but I just, we have the same
Yeah,
goals.
we want it
Basically,
to
we want
be
to handle that,
professional
settle
instead
that
of
before
quick.
the meeting. If we cannot settle, we want to handle that in a professional way, in a quick way.
And I will commit to you that if we go into a meeting with disagreement about the minutes, I will do what I did this month and pull them out. And you'll notice they're under new business.
Yeah,
this
yeah, I
month,
see that. I see.
Rather than having to go through the whole, let's pull this out of the
That's right.
consent agenda
That's right.
and move and second, blah, blah, blah. So I will commit to you that if we go into a meeting
Yes.
with disagreement, I'll do that. And that will speed up the process.
Yes,
Is that
that's right.
okay?
I appreciate it. I understand
Okay.
we have the same goals.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you have, these kind of working sessions, so you can have some open,
I think this has
respectful
been
discussions.
really
And
useful,
also-
yeah.
Yeah, and also change this agenda. I see that there's some, I think there's, we have a lot of positive moves, so.
Thank you.
I
That means a
appreciate
lot.
that. Yeah,
I
thank you.
appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Did you, at the end, or, I saw hands, but,
Yeah, pretty much. With the current, I predict there will be less.
I hope so.
Okay, and but in the future, if it something that will as well, and then as what we started, we can make adjustment, right? So I think it's good.
Okay. Is everybody, Daisha, I do want to give us time for a break before we start the other.
Yes, sorry, we jumped from Robert's rules to minutes, but we
It's
didn't
kind of all of
finish.
a piece.
Right, and which is totally fine. There's just one part of Robert's rules that I wanted to make sure we were all on the same page. I hope it won't happen in this meeting, but I think it's important. In all of the reading that I've done in research, Robert's rules motions are typically majority, like that's just the most common. And they said the only time it's a 2/3 vote is when you're restricting the rights of its members. So if you're trying to limit debate or change established rules, you have to have a 2/3 vote, which is not the same. This document, which I appreciate you putting, someone putting here
That'd
that's
be
sharing.
4 or 5.
So it would be 5 because that's where it goes
round
to.
up, okay.
The confusion is this document actually does not say the same, and I haven't found it anywhere else, and it doesn't need to be decided right now. I just think it would be helpful by the next meeting if we all, we knew what we were doing. So on this document, it's saying when you want to end debate, I moved the previous question, that it's a majority. And like I said, as I researched that topic, because this came up several times, and they said that this one's very important because what you're trying to do is limit conversation and debate, and you're not trying to shut people down. And so they're very strict, not strict, but this is key for 2/3 vote. So I wondered if before the next meeting, that can be researched better so that we're all on the same page of what's 2/3 and what's majority.
So tell me again which you wanted to,
The one that says in debate,
3, 4, 5 from top, first page.
okay?
so that one, and so you have kind of two options when there's a debate going on that you want to limit it. One option is to call the question, which means I want to stop
Yeah.
the debate right now. But that takes a second and it takes a 2/3. The other option is you can move to limit debate. Like you could say, I want a certain time period for this debate. I want everybody just to have one chance. That also, it needs a second and a 2/3 vote before those two move forward. And then besides changing rules, everything else is a majority. And this is just in conflict. So is not the same as of everything else through a whole variety of sources that I have found for that.
I don't see call the question on here. Am I just needing?
Yeah,
new
call
faces?
the question isn't on there.
It's the same as the previous question. You
Yeah.
can say it either way. Where it says in debate, that's the goal on the front page, nope, other side. If you go 1, 2, 3, 4,
Okay,
5.
yeah. Oh, move the previous question,
Yeah.
okay. Can we all agree that if we're calling the question, it needs to be 2/3, and then we can just move on with life? UA and David, you cool? Okay, let's just all write that in there. Instead of majority on end debate, we'll make it a 2/3, which is 5 out of 7.
Amy, can I clarify one thing? I know we need to break for our meeting, but when you want to limit debate on a topic, it can't happen inside of the topic. It has to happen at the top of the debate. So
Okay.
we couldn't get halfway through. Now, you as a board chair could say, we're going to take one more round and move on, and you could be overridden by a vote. But if you feel like there's a majority, like that there might be a topic that we could spend an hour on, or say it's minutes, and you might say, okay, everybody, we're going to limit this to X amount of time per person, but you have to do that up front of the discussion.
I can't say, oh, I had no idea we were all going to talk about this for an hour. Okay.
Right.
That makes sense. This is going to take practice, and I would appreciate you guys being patient with me as we change things. And I will be patient with all of you, and hopefully we can move forward in better order. What did you call it? Order and
Good order and discipline.
Order and discipline, which neither of which have been my strong suit. Okay, we're going to recess for 10 minutes and we'll come back here at 6:06. Is that okay? Are we allowed to do that? I think we're allowed to do that. Is that okay to come back at 6:06? Come back at 6?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll come back at 6. Everybody run. And we'll be
Back
quick.
at 6, immediately recess for 5 minutes.
POSSIP is an online platform that is being used to collect family feedback in a convenient way through email and text. It's also translatable. Funding for this was obtained through the IDOE through the Digital Learning Family Engagement Grant. Much of my time this year has been focused on the IDOE Family Friendly Schools designation, so I'd like to talk a little bit more about that in detail. So the West Lafayette School Corporation is pursuing this designation, which originally was established by the Indiana Department of Education in 2015, with the goal of addressing the academic, physical, emotional, and social needs of students and fostering the active involvement of families within the school and the community. The process for obtaining the state designation is robust. Each school applies for the designation individually.